Hey, Steve Saretsky here. Welcome back to the show. I want to put this video together. As always, as we enter into the new year, I'm just wrapping up some holiday time in Palm Springs, but I want to get this video out as really just a little bit of information as to things that I'm watching here early on in the new year. It's still so early, we can't make any conclusions as to how the things are going to shape up. There's a lot of things I'm kind of paying close attention to. And one of them, of course, remains economic data. But I think that, the economic data continues to kind of surprise, right? I mean, how many people would have been sitting here watching this channel 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and say, hey, listen, guys, rates are going to go up 500 basis points, and the stock market would be pretty much unchanged since the rate hiking cycle began. U.S. Canadian house prices relatively unchanged. It has been surprising, so I think it's certainly brought some humility, at least to myself, in terms of looking at the data. And it's funny seeing all these economic data points coming out right now, and everybody's kind of taking their little bits of data that they want to fit their narrative or their bias and sort of construe it, right? I mean, I'm just looking, today we had the U.S. jobs number, which everybody was paying attention to. Okay, how is that going to play out? Is it going to allow the Fed room to pivot and cut rates? And it was like the headline number was actually exceeded expectations. It looked pretty good. And then when you sort of dive underneath the numbers and underneath the headline, it didn't look so great. But, the markets are still really trying to figure it out. And, what we've seen here is the bond market start to push yields back up a little bit. You're seeing some of the rate cuts. I think the markets were pricing in 6 cuts. Now they're down to 5. But so again, there's going to be a lot of volatility this year. And I think that's what I think is going to be the main thesis for 2024 is volatility and uncertainty. I think people are getting maybe a little bit more comfortable with tiptoeing back into markets, but in general, there's still a lot of volatility and a lot of uncertainty about as to how this is going to play out, right? We've heard all these narratives, soft landing, hard landing, then we heard no landing. And, so it is a pretty precarious situation. One thing that we do know for sure is that the U.S. is in a significantly better position than Canada is, right? I mean, we think about all the interest rate sensitive debt that is here in Canada that rolls over every 2, 3, 4, 5 years, all these mortgages coming due. And so that's something I'm kind of watching for, the Canada 5-year bond yield, which I think is incredibly important for seeing where mortgage rates are going, where they're going to be, and how it's going to impact housing activity. We've seen the 5-year bond yield push back up 20 basis points over the last couple weeks. So that's kind of put a lid on any recent declines in mortgage rates. So we're kind of still stuck in the low 5s. And again, if we want to get it down to sub 5 into the 4s, we're going to need a little bit of flexibility from the bond market. And again, getting the bond market to play ball is never an easy thing. It is wildly unpredictable. So, looking at the Canadian data, though, you can clearly see some very clear evidence in economic weakness. The labor market, for the month of December here, we added, 100 jobs, and we had 74, an increase in the labor force of 74,000 people, right? All the new immigrants coming in to the country, et cetera. So, you added 74,000 working age people into the country, but you only added 100 jobs and they were all part-time. So, and this is not like a one month trend. We've seen hours work here in this country continue to slide lower for quite some time. And so you can see, I think the Canadian economy is clearly weak. I do believe the Bank of Canada will be cutting rates this year. I think how much remains to be seen. How much does inflation play ball, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that's the one thing I would just, again, really emphasize here is having humility. And that's something, and again, something that I've had to sort of come to appreciate, that these things are hard. It's really challenging right now to get I don't have a strong view. I don't have a strong view right now as to where the markets are or where they're going to be 6 or 12 months from now. I just think there's too much uncertainty and the data is just really all over the place. And you're seeing, like I said, you're seeing this argument play out online, on Twitter, with all the top financial market commentators all arguing about what kind of landing we're having. And again, I still think that story remains to be played out. The ending has not yet been written, and so we'll see. I had this gentleman actually email me. We talked about on the Looney Hour 2 weeks ago, and we said I said listen, house prices nationally more or less are down about 5 to 10%, which is quite surprising given the 500 basis point move in interest rates from the Bank of Canada on top of what was an extended housing euphoria, huge credit bubble. We get a 500 basis point move in rates and house prices are down like 5 to 10%. And this guy, emails me and says, "Oh, your number's wrong. They're down 20+%." I'm going, if we actually just use some objective calculations here, if you look at the National House Price Index from its peak to where it is right now, it's down 12%. If you look at Greater Vancouver home prices, you look at the MLS Home Price Index, you are down 7.4% since it peaked back in February, March of 2022. So again, I would argue if you look at it, yes, there's some far-flung suburbs. We know that, Chilliwack, BC, Mission, British Columbia, we know those markets from their peak are down about 15 to 20%. We know that Brampton, Ontario, and some of these far-flung suburbs are down 20, 25%. But as a whole, Canada's major metropolitan cities are down on average about, let's call it 5 to 10%. If you're realistically looking to sell your home, and you went to go sell it in February of 2022, and now you're reselling it today, you're looking at a 5 to 10% discount, which in the grand scheme of things, right, like basically 2 full years later, that's it. I'm personally very, very surprised. If you had wound back the clock, I would have told you we'd be looking at minimum 20%. So, and again, I'm not saying that the correction is over, but I'm just saying it has brought on some humility that, hey, listen, and I think these people, again, that are calling for the 40, 50, 60% crash, the wave of inventory, which we haven't seen, you would think it would bring some humility as to where things are moving this year. And again, the truth is I just don't have enough strong conviction. Where I do have some conviction is, again, on the pre-sale side. I think there's going to be more issues there. I still think that on the lower credit spectrum, so I'm talking high ratio borrowers, private lending, mortgage investment corps, you're going to see more issues with defaults there. But again, just nothing of real significance has sort of popped through just yet. So we'll kind of wait and see. That's funny enough, the BC assessment numbers came out this week. So if anyone is curious what the government has assessed your home values at, you can go to bcassessment.ca, type that in. That's going to basically impact your property tax bill, because the city takes your assessment value, they assign a mill rate to it, and then they determine what your tax bill is going to be for that year. And so what we can see is in the assessment values across all of BC. Remember, this is them. They compare it from July 2022 to July 2023, and they've got plus or minus 5%. So as a whole, depending on what city you are in BC, you're basically up or you're down 5%. So again, really modest. This just hasn't been a whole lot going on. I think it's been really, really surprising. That's what everybody keeps talking about, in financial markets, the no landing, which again, I'm really still struggling to think that's going to be the end result, but you can't rule these things out as possibilities. So just as we look forward, watching what's happening in the bond market. I know I've had a lot of people reach out in the past and say, hey, mortgage rates, what's going on? What should I do? I've personally got a very small mortgage that's renewing this May. We took it out. It was a 2-year deal at 2.84%. That's coming up for renewal in May. So I'm actively watching, as I always do, watching the bond market to sort of see how that's going to play out. So, this is kind of the fun of it, but I would just caution everybody here in the new year to take all the data with a grain of salt and humility, because I think what we're seeing is everybody's pulling these different data points out and finding little data points within the data to sort of reaffirm or confirm their own narrative or their own biases. And we're all subject to that. I'm subject to my own biases and views just as much as anybody else's. We really try to take that out and trade the market how it is, not how you want it to be. And that's kind of basically what I ultimately said to this gentleman who emailed me with a Loonie Hour, trying to argue that I was, manipulating or not hiding data, that national house prices were down 20%. And again, I think anyone that's really paying attention can agree that in most major metropolitan cities across Canada, it's somewhere in the range of 5 to 10%. So we'll see how that shapes up here in 2024, but we'll have a lot more to talk about as the week progresses and as people come out of the holidays and back into the full swing of things. So as always, hope that helped. See you next week.